agree that if congressional Republicans really care about enforcing Title VI, they would support fully funding rather than trying to cut funding for the Office of Civil Rights at the Department of Education to ensure that the office has adequate staffing in anticipation of a surge in Title VI complaints?
I would say that anyone who cares about civil rights and enforcement against anti-Semitic actions should fund that office.
And Ms. Burdett, was the Office for Civil Rights already inundated with complaints of anti-Semitism and Islamophobia before October 7th?
They had their record year of complaints in 2016, I'm sorry to say, and that record was broken in 2022 at almost 19,000 complaints. They have worked through them, but they are working with, I think, 12% less staff, so it just doesn't make any sense at all.
And what happened after October 7th?
After October 7th, we already know from NGOs like the one cited, where my professional alma mater, ADL, talking about hundreds of percent increase. But if you ask Mr. Nadler, the NYPD, even reports coming to them in just 3 weeks have been skyrocketing. And when you compare it to an average month of October, there are 3 times as many incidents. And I'm sure police departments in a lot of congressional districts would say the same.
And what do you think will happen going forward?
We know that every time Israel is in the headlines, unfortunately, attacks against Jews go up. So inappropriate. There's no war, there's no conflict, there's no injustice that entitles someone to punch their neighbor in the face, to spit at them, and all the things we've heard here from these students. I think that this war won't be a 6-day war. This conflict, the tension on campus, is going to take a very long time to work through. It's really a work in progress, and I think we're going to be dealing with these incidents for a long time. That's why I mentioned the Community Relations Service. I don't know if we think about it every day, but those civil rights tools and instruments and outreach programs that we have, they're going to work first. The universities and those programs have the ability to help Ms. Silberstein right now without a law and without a markup.
Thank you. Professor Nadler and Ms. Burdett, in your testimony, you noted the White House's national strategy to counter anti-Semitism. For the record, I would also note that the White House is also pursuing an analogous national strategy to counter Islamophobia. To the extent you are able, can you explain the national strategy to counter anti-Semitism and highlight why you think it's valuable and effective?
Thank you. Thank you for your question. I was one of the 1,000 people that the White House talked to as they were developing the national strategy to counter anti-Semitism. This is an extraordinary document. It runs to, 60, 70 pages, and it is filled with recommendations about what can be done to respond to anti-Semitism in different venues and in different agencies in the United States government. As I said in my opening remarks, I know of no country that has ever developed such a strategy, and believe me, as we know from the testimony of Ms. Silberstein, we know that other countries could have developed this if they had the goodwill to do so. So, for example, it talks about, as Ms. Burdett was talking about, it talks about what should be done in the Office of Civil Rights in the Department of Education. Since the Obama administration, Title VI has protected Jewish students under Title VI by understanding that they need to be protected based on ancestry and based on ethnicity, because Title VI doesn't specify based on religion. And to understand Jewish identity, it's a very complicated phenomenon. So there are these kinds of measures there. But what I'm hearing from Ms. Burdett, and I'm not an expert on funding in the government, is that it's not been sufficiently funded. And what is very clear, both from Ms. Burdett's testimony and from Mr. Marcus's testimony, is that it's going to need more support than ever before. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me just say to Ms. Jordan and Mr. Ogritziak, I hope I haven't mispronounced your name, as a very proud left-wing liberal, I hold no truck with trying to silence conservative voices or any other voices. And on college campuses or anywhere else, freedom of speech is a fundamental value. And I would just say that this is not new. When I was an undergraduate at Columbia, I was shouted down by an organization called the Students for Democratic Society because I was not left-wing enough in their opinion. This is something that is an ongoing fight, and in a liberal society, we must conduct it. And I'm sorry for your experience. Oh, and I ask unanimous consent to include the following items in the record. Written testimony of Jonathan Greenblatt, CEO and National Director of the Anti-Defamation League. A letter dated November 6, 2023 from Secretary of Education Miguel Cardona to Speaker Mike Johnson outlining the Department of Education's efforts to combat anti-Semitism and Islamophobia on college campuses. An op-ed piece in the New York Times dated October 30th, 2023, co-authored by the deans of the Princeton School of Public and International Affairs and the Columbia School of International and Public Affairs, and an article from Inside Higher Education titled, House Republicans Plan to Cut Education Department's Budget, noting that Republican appropriators want to cut about 25% from the department's Office for Civil Rights.
That was a long title. Without objection, so